Hello, everyone. Happy Thursday. This is Adrian with Prep Agent. Today, we're going to be talking about financing, real estate finance. Yay! Can we get an energetic yay? Let me know if you can hear me. Ooh, Kevin's energetic. He says, "We." Looks like people can hear me. Awesome. Welcome, Jay Valencia, Jessica Jackson, Baroska Myers, Patricia Douglas. Got a big crew going this morning, some South Carolina. At Ben is in the house. Anagon is in the house. Lloyd Dev, awesome. Welcome, everyone. Hope you're having a great start to your Thursday. Jerry's an accountant, so if you need anybody to do some adding, we'll probably need some of that today. He's probably got a little bit of a head start with this finance stuff. Lucky you. So I did see that some people have their exams coming up. I want to wish those people good luck. Let you know that the whole prep agent community is behind you. Fingers crossed, four-leaf clovers out. And sending you good juju to pass your exam. All y'all, everybody who's got the exam coming up. I think it's a great thing you're doing, studying with us. Hopefully we'll cover some things that will help you today, help you when your exam comes up. Jerry says real estate's a little bit harder than accounting. Well, that probably makes the rest of us feel a little better, Jerry, so I appreciate that. But it is true because real estate, I talk about this all the time when I'm talking to people who don't understand why they don't feel like they learned more from their pre-licensing. And just because there's so many different disciplines in real estate, right? You're learning some finance, you're learning economics, you're learning real estate law, you're learning contract law, all that different stuff. So it is kind of difficult, and that's why it requires so much study. And that's why it's awesome that y'all are here getting ready to learn something this morning. Ben says that Cynthia did a great job yesterday with test anxiety. If anybody else has any feedback on that particular webinar, we'd love to hear it. It's something we haven't tried before because it is hard to fill up 40 minutes full of, value when you're talking about something like that. But if y'all got a lot out of that, about being able to have a conversation with her, then let me know. Because that's really helpful feedback when we're choosing what our webinar schedule is gonna look like going forward. All right, Jessica's ready to rock and roll. Lots of questions today. So let's sort of get into that. But before we launch into the question on the board, this first question up here is about a trust deed, right? And that's not something everybody has to deal with in every state. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that. Before we launch into that, I just want to check out some of the feedback. Nice. So she definitely helped a lot of people who are experiencing some of that anxiety, gave you some idea of what to expect when you go into the testing facility. So that is really helpful. Appreciate that feedback. We will definitely do more on other topics going forward. Ooh, good luck, Marquita. Test Saturday. Okay, so let's get started with today's subject matter, right? So we're going to start off with something that's kind of confusing to everybody, but I thought was worth getting into, and that is lien theory versus title theory. Some of you may have heard these words thrown about a little bit, and it's pretty confusing to a lot of people. So let's start with lien theory. Jorge says trust deed. Let's talk about trust deed. We're going to save that for last. We will start with lien theory, right? So what's the best way to start off with this? So when we talk about liens, we talk about money, right? Lien money, lien money, lien money. Well, specifically, what a lien on your house does is it allows somebody to place a hold on your ability to do anything with that house until they get paid back, right? So when you go and get a mortgage for a home loan, what you're doing is exchanging a promise, right? You're exchanging your death pledge to them that you're going to pay them back. And in exchange for that, they get to place a lien on your home, right? So when they place a lien on your house, that basically prevents you from selling that house or doing anything else with it until the lender gets paid back. And as Patricia says, when the lenders place a lien on your house, it is lien theory. So when you hear about lien theory and title theory, that's one of the biggest differences, is that lien theory follows a doctrine, and all a doctrine is like just sort of a philosophy, sort of like, oh, this is how we do things, right? That's how a doctrine works. So when a lender gets to place a lien on your home, then generally they're operating under the lien theory. So what that means is that as a buyer, as a borrower, you still get to put your name on the title, right? But you don't really get to hang on to the title. You get to put your name on the title or on the deed and then give that to the lender, and the lender holds that until the lien is paid off. Well, what happens if you have to get into a foreclosure, as Lotis just said, is that if the title, if the deed, excuse me, is in your name and the borrower needs to foreclose on it, they have to go through a court of law to make that foreclosure happen. That's what we call a judicial foreclosure. It's one where the lender has to go through the courts in order to foreclose on your home, right? So that's what we talk about when we talk about lien theory. Lien theory just means that the lender gets to place a lien on your property while the loan is being paid back, and that in order to foreclose on your home, they need to go through a judicial process. They have to go through a court process in order to foreclose on your home. That's a little bit different than trust deeds. So somebody asked us to cover trust deeds. That's what the first question up here on the board is. So what happens with a trust deed is that the um, the lender gets to put their name on the deed, but they don't get to keep that deed, right? Because that would give them too much power over what's going on with the home. So instead of the deed being in the borrower's name, the deed is in the lender's name, but it's placed into the care of a third party, what we call a trustee. And that trustee hangs on to that deed until the loan is paid off. However, if the loan doesn't get paid off and if a foreclosure needs to happen, then the trustee can just say, well, this is already in the lender's name, so we don't need to petition a court to foreclose. We can just go ahead and hold a trustee sale, as Patricia just said, and we don't need to go through a court. So that's a non-judicial foreclosure. That is what we call a title theory. And what that basically says is that the lender gets to keep title to your property until it's paid off. They get to put the deed in their name until it's paid off, and it's held by a third party until everything is resolved. The biggest difference, the biggest reason that people care about this is because of how easy it is to foreclose on a home. So when you talk about lien theory and title theory, and again, lien theory is when you have just uh, a mortgage between a lender and a borrower, right? Those are the only two parties involved. So a lien theory says that the lender gets to put a lien on your property. Title theory says that title will be held by a third party until the property is paid off. So there is no lien on your property, right? The trustee just holds the deed until it's paid off. Nora says, got it. Awesome. Victor asks, who else or who can be a trustee? There's a lot of different options for that, Victor. So I would look in your state. That can vary by state, but it's generally somebody with some sort of a legal background or like an escrow type person. So just somebody who's verified to be like an impartial third party, right? So as Jerry says, a title company or attorney can be the trustee, but in other trustee states, they will allow others to qualify to be a trustee. And Elise asks, who is the third party? So the third party, Elise, is there so that you don't need a lien, right? So the reason that a lien theory state works so well is because a lien is a legal right to someone's property. It's not full ownership of that property, but you have some legal rights to a property if you have a legitimate lien placed on that property. So that is the lender's assurance that they're going to get paid back, is that lien, right? So with a trust deed, with a title theory state where you have a trust deed, instead of a lien providing that assurance for the lender, you have an impartial third party called the trustee that hangs on to that deed until the loan is resolved, one way or the other. And so the lender is trusting that trustee to deal with the deed properly, right? So instead of a lien on the property, they have an impartial third party that is required by law to deal with that deed legitimately. I hope that makes sense to everybody. So Ellen says title is third party, lien is two party. Yes. In a title theory state, you're going to have three parties: a trustor, which is the borrower, a trustee, which is the third party, and a beneficiary, which is the lender. With a lien theory state, you have two parties, just the borrower and the lender. That's it. Nursing the Real Estate asks, is trust deed the same as title theory? Yes, a title theory state is one that uses a trust deed. Grant asks, so title theory is when a mortgage company holds the title. Not a mortgage company, Grant, but like a title company can do that, a company that does title searches, or an attorney. But it's very specifically, the trustee has to be not affiliated with the mortgage company, with the lending company, right? So that third party has to be impartial. They need to be not connected to the mortgage company. All right, so Ellen, yes, a trustee holds the deed. Ben says, got it. Beverly says, got it. Nora says, a trustee is something like an overseer. Yes. All right, it looks like we got it. And Akan says, Joe has a video on that. He does. We do have a video on that. Tiffany asks, who is the beneficiary? So in a title theory state, the beneficiary is just the lender. Um, they're the ones that the trustee is holding the title for. They're holding it in trust, actually, for the beneficiary, right? So the beneficiary is the lender. If you've never heard of this, you are probably in a lien theory state and you do mortgages instead of trust deeds. And so that's fine. If you don't have to deal with trust deeds, if you didn't learn about trust deeds in your pre-license course, then all you need to do you really need to understand? I would recommend understanding it so you know the difference between a trust deed and a mortgage, because if you can explain that to your clients, you're going to sound like the smartest real estate agent they ever encountered, right? If you can tell them, well, look, this is why you have to do a mortgage. I know it's a pain in the butt, but blah, blah, blah liens and blah, blah lien theory and blah, judicial foreclosure, you're going to sound smart. And if you're in a trust deed state, you've already heard of a beneficiary and a trustee and all that stuff. Line asks, is California a lien theory state? No, Cali is the other, trust deeds. It is title theory. Okay, so let's jump into the questions on the board. There is a blend of the two, which is called intermediate theory, but California is considered title theory, which uses a trustee which uses a trustee and a trust deed. Mortgages are allowed in California, but they are not as common because of the foreclosure. And the only reason this stuff is important, so you guys understand, is because it almost always has to do with foreclosure. If a state wants an easy, non-judicial foreclosure, they will use a trust deed system, title theory. If a state wants the owners, the purchasers of the property to have more rights, then they will use a lien theory state because the title actually stays in the purchaser's name in that case. So it's harder to foreclose on, but the purchaser, the borrower, gets slightly more rights in that case. So I hope that makes sense to everybody. We're going to go ahead and launch into the questions on the board. Um, and you're always welcome to ask me, just like shoot me an email asking any for clarification if there's something on that that I didn't cover in detail enough for you. All right, Anacon has it, so we are going to rock and roll forward. A trustee legally began the process to sell property secured by a trustee. After the notice of default is recorded, the trustee must wait at least 3 months before. Oh, and you know what? I just realized why this question is about trustees. We'll go ahead and answer it for those of you that might understand this, but this is actually state specific. So my apologies for that. The trustee must wait at least 3 months before A, the foreclosure is final, B, conveying title to the beneficiary, C, issuing the reconveyance deed, or D, publishing the notice of sale. And the answer is D, publishing the notice of sale. In a foreclosure by trustee sale, the trustee must wait 3 months before publishing. Looks like all of you who happen to be in trust deed states already got that. Well played. That little curveball thrown at you first thing in the morning. That's my bad because the account that I was logged into there is not a national account. So now we have some national questions. Thank you, Lime U, Adrian Nation. Good on explaining. That is what I do. Ben asks where I'm from. I am from Idaho originally. So I fell off the potato truck something like 47 years ago. Kind of bounced all around the nation since then. Bang, bang, boogie. All right. So back to some national finance questions. Let's get going on this. Jessica Jackson asked for a bunch of questions, so I'm going to try and bang through as many of these as I can now. A clause may be inserted into a lease allowing rent to increase based upon a formula. This is known as a contingency clause, B, addendum clause, C, escalation clause, or D, acceleration clause. What does everyone think about this one? Yep, Tyler, sorry you didn't see that one before. That's okay, Beverly. If you don't recognize that, it's because you are in a lien theory state. You deal with mortgages and liens, and that is plenty to know. Trust me. All right. A clause may be inserted into a lease allowing rent to increase based upon a formula. This is known as C, an escalation clause. And so how I remember this one is that if you know what an escalator is, you know that when you step on an escalator at the mall, it takes you up step by step, right? It's like a staircase, but it takes you up automatically step by step. That's what an escalator is. That's what an escalation clause does. It allows the rent to escalate or to increase step by step based on a formula agreed to before the lease is signed. And this is mostly a commercial sort of thing, right? And so if a landlord is giving a commercial tenant a break when they start off, but they expect the tenant to start making money pretty quickly, they might have an escalation clause. Or if they expect the property to increase in value, they might have an escalation clause. But this comes up anytime we're talking really commercial property transfer. Lime Yosu, I always read that as Lime Yosu says, makes sense. Should have read rent mortgage is when acceleration comes on. Exactly. Maritza says commercial only. It doesn't have to be commercial only. It's just most commonly used in commercial. Most people aren't going to sign a residential lease that escalates like that. All right. A standard for expressing the true annual cost of borrowing is expressed as the A, Regulation Z, B, APR, C, RESPA, or D, ECOA. We've got a lot of acronyms up on the board here. Ben says living in California, his residential lease feels like it has an escalation clause. I feel you there. I've lived in a couple different places where the rent goes up so regularly that it feels like you're on an escalation clause, an escalator clause. All right, so back to this question on the board. A standard for expressing the true annual cost of borrowing is expressed as the B, APR, the annual percentage rate. So let's just touch on these a little bit because a few people had other answers to this one. Regulation Z is TILA. What does TILA regulate? Can anybody tell me what TILA regulates? We're going to try and go through these as quickly as possible because, like I said, I do want to bang through a bunch of questions. Regulation Z, also known as TILA, does regulate the cost of credit, stands for the Truth in Lending Act. TILA is actually what created the annual percentage rate, or the APR, but TILA does not express the true annual cost of borrowing, right? So immediately when we're looking at these answers, we can cross TILA out because we know that TILA created the APR, but it doesn't express the annual cost of borrowing itself. TILA or Regulation Z is just a law, it's a regulation. Same thing with RESPA, right? What does RESPA stand for? And ECOA. Let's cover both of these. What are RESPA and ECOA? Can anybody tell me? RESPA and ECOA, what do those acronyms stand for and what do they regulate? So as Beverly says, no kickbacks. RESPA has largely to do with presenting kickbacks. It is called the Real Estate Settlement Procedures Act. Largely regulates kickbacks, makes sure that the settling process of your home is that there's no shady business going on in the back end as far as like how the closing process works. And then the ECOA is the Equal Credit Opportunity Act, right? So that regulates credit and credit fairness, that it's offered to people fairly and equally, right? So both of those things, RESPA and ECOA, are regulations. Those are laws, just like Regulation Z. None of those are going to be the unit of expressing the true annual cost of borrowing. Those are all overarching regulations. APR is the only selection we're given that actually expresses a number. So hopefully that makes sense to everybody on these answers, and a quick way to sort of work through those answers to get the right one. And nice job, by the way, on defining the acronyms. Everybody got those right pretty quickly. Love to see that. So let's jump to the next question on the board. Homeowners may deduct all of the following expenses on their tax return except A, depreciation and maintenance expenses, B, mortgage interest paid, C, property taxes paid, or D, points on a purchase money mortgage. So what do we think here? So Ben asked me, what about Regulation Z? On that last question, Regulation Z is the same as TILA, the Truth in Lending Act, and that's what created the APR. The Truth in Lending Act created the APR. So the APR expresses the actual cost of borrowing. That's the number that TILA requires lenders to give you up front so that you know exactly how much you're paying for the money that you're borrowing. Okay, it looks like that makes sense. So let's jump back to this question on the board now. Homeowners may deduct all of the following expenses on their tax return except A, depreciation and maintenance expenses. Maintenance, depreciation, repair can be deducted in commercial real estate. But you cannot deduct you can deduct mortgage interest, you can deduct your property taxes, and you can deduct points because those are interest paid up front, right? That's essentially what discount points are, interest paid up front. And so when you're talking about homeowners deducting these expenses, if you notice, All of these expenses that you can deduct are the cost of obtaining credit and purchasing your home, right? So mortgage interest and discount points are costs of obtaining credit. Property taxes are money that you have to pay the state in order to keep your home, right? So these are all costs that don't have anything to do with the actual value of your home. So you can deduct those costs. Depreciation and maintenance affect the actual value of your home, right? So they affect whether or not your home's value goes up or down with absolutely zero, well, they have to do with your house going up or down based on the actual value of the physical home itself or of its location, right? They're not costs that you had to pay out of pocket in order to own the home. So you can deduct costs paid out of pocket just that have to do with owning the home, but you cannot deduct the appreciation or depreciation of the value of your home. Does that make sense? Did I just explain that in a way that makes sense? Let me know. So you cannot deduct a new water heater, no, because that increases the value of your home and appreciates the value of your home. Putting on a new roof is not something that you can deduct either because that increases the value of your home. What you can deduct are things that costs that you have to pay just for owning the home. But when you affect the value of your home up or down, that is not deductible. Okay, now that makes sense to everybody. Awesome. That's a new way of explaining it that you all just challenged me to come up with. So I'm going to log that one away for future reference. And we are going to move on. Beth asks, is that for all states? Yes, that's an IRS thing, Beth. Lime, you'll see, asks like a plumber's fee. No deduction on a plumber's fee because that's maintenance. Same thing with a new patio, no deduction there. And Megan asks, I thought you could deduct expenses. You can, that's adjusting your cost basis, Megan. And that's a different thing than deductions, right? So adjusting your cost basis is a different way of compensating for physical deterioration or economic obsolescence or all of those things. And investments are a little bit different, Allison. We're talking about standard homeowner type stuff right here. For the most part, we're talking about standard homeowner stuff. All right, let's jump to the next question on the board. Which of the following expenses is tax deductible for homeowners? A, utility payments. B, interest paid on mortgages. C, pest control. Or D, addition of a pool. So hopefully we're all going to get this one right, because I don't know if you caught this or not, but this is what we've been talking about for the last several minutes. Which of the following expenses is tax deductible for homeowners? And the answer is B, interest paid on mortgages. Because again, interest paid on a mortgage is a cost out of your pocket just for owning the home. It's a cost you have to pay just for being a homeowner. Utility payments are a consistent cost that everybody has to pay whether you own a home or not. Pest control is a maintenance cost. An addition of a pool is an improvement addition that affects the value of a home, so you cannot deduct it from your tax. Makes sense? Improvements not deductible from they're not tax deductible. They are deductible from your cost basis, right? But they're not deductible on your IRS return. Okay, Laura says, got it. Janet says, I'm a great instructor. Well, thank you, Janet. That is very, very kind of you, and I appreciate that. More than you know on a Thursday morning. All right, let's bang through some more. In a fully amortized loan, A, the interest portion of each payment increases throughout the term of the loan. B, interest may be paid in arrears at the end of each period for which it is earned. C, the final interest payment will be determined after the last payment is made. Or D, only the interest is paid in each payment period. Thank you, Jennifer and Beverly. Laura and Lime Yosu, much appreciated for all your props. We all put a lot of work into this. We all have our different ways of going about this, as I'm sure you've all learned. Some of you probably have your favorite instructors by now, but it's one of the reasons we wanted to expand and have more voices. Like I don't sound anything like Joe, but I do webinars a lot like Joe because, he's my what'd you call my Jedi Master. He's the one who taught me how to go about all of this stuff. But Stu and Cynthia already have their own like MOs about this stuff, and I think it's awesome having the extra voices. We all talk about this stuff in different ways, and hopefully you all get some value out of all of the different types of teaching. So we'll talk about arrears in just a minute, Megan. Let's go ahead and jump through this question real quick. In a fully amortized loan, B, interest may be paid in arrears at the end of each period for which it is earned. So somebody asked what arrears was. Arrears basically means at the rear of the period, right? So interest can be paid after it has already been after the cost has already been accrued, if that makes sense. So if you pay for something, if you prepay for your taxes, for example, so like a lot of us, when we're talking about income taxes, like I have a certain percentage that the prep agent keeps out of my paycheck, right? And so I'm basically prepaying those taxes. And what happens is when we file our taxes at the end of the year, the IRS takes a look at what I've prepaid and they subtract the taxes I've owned from that sort of thing, right? If I had prep agent keep 0% out of my paychecks for taxes, then at the end of the year, when I filed my taxes, I would have to pay all of my taxes in arrears, right? So my taxes, I've been accruing the charge of those taxes all throughout the year as the year's been going along. And when I pay for it in arrears, I do it after that earning period has closed out. If I'm prepaying, then I'm paying before that earning period has even started. Does that make sense? It looks like sort of that makes sense. Utilities are paid in arrears. Correct. Utilities usually paid in arrears. Tay asked, do we have state-specific questions on the platform? Most states do. So if you send us an email using the contact form on our website, that is under the More menu in the upper right-hand corner of your prep agent account. If you send us an email so that we can take a look at your specific account, we'll look into that for you. All right. Next question, says Nora. Lime Yosu, 10 words a day. Nice. That's a faster way to learn your words. Next question on the board. The type of mortgage loan which permits borrowing additional funds at a later date is called A, an open-end mortgage, B, an equitable mortgage, C, a junior mortgage, or D, an extendable mortgage. What do you think here? Ben, that's a great question. I do get asked that sometimes about private tutoring. And Joe and I do not do private tutoring. And the reason for that is because when we're not here on the webinars with you, when I'm not doing support, we are researching and writing scripts for new videos. And I don't know if any of you happened to catch the Instagram video that Joe did, I think talking about title theory and lien theory even. Some people brought it up earlier, and it's not one of our animated videos. It's him talking into a camera, but it was more entertaining. I think anyway, like Joe got to be a little funnier. And so that's what we spend our time on is sort of bringing you all content that helps everybody out a little bit rather than the private tutoring. However, we may be something that we consider going forward, right? Let's get back to the question on the board. The type of mortgage loan which permits borrowing additional funds at a later date is called A, open end. Let's see. We did have a few guesses here. To me, the only one that I would have confused it with is sort of an extendable mortgage because I've never heard of that. And so I would never select an extendable mortgage. My guess is that's the same thing That's just sort of a tricky word for open-end mortgage. Let's take a quick look. If there is such a thing as an extendable mortgage, there is not. No such thing as an extendable mortgage. And an equitable mortgage, I am just going to double check before I speak on that because I don't get to talk to them too much. But yeah, okay. In an equitable mortgage, that just means that the owner has transferred their title deed to the lender, right? So that's all that an equitable mortgage means. It's a way of creating a charge on a property. It's not something that most of us need to know for our exams, so we're not going to get too deep into that. And then a junior mortgage, I think a bunch of you already got that right, but a junior mortgage just has to do with lien priority, right? So that's like a second mortgage taken out on the home for either a home equity line of credit or some other type of second mortgage type thing. The second mortgage is likely going to be a junior mortgage in that case. So an open-end mortgage just means that you have the option of talking to the lender about getting more funds, about increasing the loan amount. When would you use that? What sort of a situation do you think that comes up in when we talk about like what sort of a market? Do you think that comes up in the residential market? Do you think it comes up in the commercial market? When do you think open-end mortgages tend to apply? Construction, great. That's a great one, Troy. Construction is a great one. Upgrades is another potential. So a residential mortgage when you're looking and upgrading. But usually when you're talking about construction in a residential or a commercial loan. Ben says, not sure. That's a great point, Ben. When I asked that, I was not thinking about construction on a residential. But that's actually a great point. You know, when either new construction or when you're adding an addition, you're not quite sure exactly what it's going to cost. You're going to get an open-end mortgage. All right, let's do a couple more here. Kind of had a long lecture to start off. I want to make sure I give y'all some question value, that we cover enough questions. So this one asks, the amount of a loan expressed as a percentage of the value of the real estate offered as collateral is the A, loan to value ratio, B, debt to equity ratio, C, capital use ratio, or D, amortization ratio. What do you all think? Whew, good luck, Limeo Sue. Got a class exam that's going to be 3 hours. That's like a straight up state exam right there. But for those of you that are curious about this process, pre-licensing, as you've probably noticed, is required to cover a lot more information than prep agent. They cover way more information than actually comes up on the exam. So that's part of why their class finals are so long sometimes. All right, back to the question on the board. The amount of a loan expressed as a percentage of the value of real estate offered as collateral is the A, loan to value ratio. And it looks like most of y'all killed that one. But what I would use in trying to like break this one down, what's really important is that it says the amount of a loan, right? So very specifically in the question, we're looking for something to do with a loan. And only loan to value ratio or amortization ratio could be potential answers as far as the amount of a loan. I guess debt, debt doesn't necessarily have to do with a loan because you can get debt in a bunch of different ways. Usually, I guess, has to do with that, but I don't even know that we talk about debt to equity ratios very much when trying to obtain financing. Let's take a quick look. Yeah, that's actually more corporate, less real estate as far as debt to equity ratio, just so that everybody knows. So loan to value ratio is the most obvious one. Amortization ratio would be something else I would look at. But when you realize that you're talking about a percentage of the real estate's value, then suddenly amortization doesn't make sense anymore, right? So let's do one more. Who is the largest purchaser in the secondary market? Is it A, Fannie Mae, B, Ginnie Mae, C, the FHA, or D, Freddie Mac? What do you think? Thank you for that, Kevin. Kevin says whoever gives a thumbs down to Prep Agent isn't using all the resources. Use the dashboard. Totally agree there. Um, because I think that if you use all the resources, and if you don't know how to use the resources or the best way, please reach out to us. Send us an email using the contact form. I'm happy to offer advice. I don't know if most of you have noticed, but I do like talking. I do love sharing information. It's why I'm such an explainer. It's why that's sort of how I go about things, because I love to share information. My goal is to make everybody else, like give everybody else the exact same information I have, right? That's the whole purpose of sharing information. And if you don't know how to use our content to get the most out of it and to effectively prepare yourself for the exam, if you feel lost sometimes getting into our dashboard, if you're not sure where to get going, please reach out and ask. We are working on ways of making our website more guided so it will be more obvious. But if you're not sure, we're happy to offer some advice. All right. Last question for the day. Who is the largest purchaser in the secondary market? A, Fannie Mae. Fannie Mae is the first one we learn about when we talk about the secondary market. They were the first ones created to purchase loans on the resale marketplace. And then came Ginnie Mae and Freddie Mac. And of course, the FHA does not purchase homes in the secondary market. Ben asks, oh, and that was specifically what Ben asked. So, Ben, the FHA insures loans to the sense that if you meet their standards, then they're going to guarantee your loan, but they're not a secondary market player. They do insuring of loans instead. So both of the entities, like Fannie Mae, Ginnie Mae, and Freddie Mac, as well as the FHA, their purpose is the same. Their purpose is to make residential loans easier to acquire for the average Joe, Jason, or Samantha. Um, but the way they go about it is differently. So the FHA does it by insuring loans, and then Fannie Mae, Fannie Mae and Ginnie Mae in particular do it by purchasing loans on the secondary market. So hopefully that explains what we're talking about. Yeah, looks like we all got that. Awesome. I've got to run, everybody. I need to check in with Matthew, see how his morning's going. Hopefully, some of you all have had some interaction with him. He's been a great addition to the team. He loves explaining stuff too and giving you guys great support and answers, either by phone or through email when you contact us. Um, and everything I've heard him do has been like great interaction. So we're really appreciative of having him on board. But mostly, we're appreciative of all of you being here and being on board with Prep Agent and choosing us to help you prepare for your exam and to chase down that dream. We're really honored to be part of that. So I hope you all have a great rest of your day here Thursday. Stu will be on a little bit later today. Let's take a look at what Stu's talking about. Ugh, math. So it's all numbers today. You've got an all numbers Thursday. But he will be here at 4 p.m. this afternoon, 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern this afternoon. And until then, I hope you all have a great rest of your day. Take care of each other. Appreciate one another like we appreciate you all. And we'll see you soon. Take care.